Okay, my name is Bria Miles, and I'm going to be doing the first negative response. I'm going to speak on all of my opponent's claims that he mentioned that abortion is basically the equivalent to murder, and he also talked about how a lot of our tax dollars are spent on abortion, and lastly, how adoption is a viable source to use instead of abortion. So back to his first claim that abortion is basically the equivalent to murder. The Mayo Clinic found that most abortions take place within the first trimester, which is the first 13 weeks. And that is when that the embryo is more so a cell and does not possess personhood. And many people find that when there's a big difference between personhood and humanhood. Personhood is when you're more so an actual human being and you have thoughts and you're conscious. An article done by Scientific America stated that consciousness requires a sophisticated network of highly interconnected components, nerve cells, and its physical substrate is very complex, which is highly elaborate, and begins between the 24th and 28th week of gestation. And also, according to the Mayo Clinic, it's not until the third trimester that the baby can actually survive on its own. Until then, they are fully dependent on the mother's womb. And he also mentioned the different types of abortion. One of them was how they remove the embryo from the mother. I would also like to bring up the fact that there's a process called in vitro fertilization, which is when you conceive the embryo in a dish rather than inside the mother's womb. And an article done by About.com found that human life occurs at conception, but fertilized eggs used for in vitro fertilization are also human lives, and those are not implanted and are routinely thrown away. And so is this murder, and how is abortion murder if that's not? A study done by Rutgers University found that 84% of embryos are thrown out just because they're extra during the in vitro fertilization process. And they also found that as many as 400,000 embryos are in a freezer, and they're just there in like limbo, and they don't find out until later if they're used, and if they're not used, they're just thrown away like the others. And so on to my opponent's next point about tax dollars. The National Abortion Federation found that more than 2/3 of women initially pay for their abortions themselves, and only 13% are paid with state funding, and another 13% are covered by a woman's private insurance. There is the Hyde Amendment, which was passed September 30th, 1976 by the House of Representatives, that denies federal Medicaid for abortions except in specific cases like in specific rare circumstances, and most of the states have similar laws restricting financial help to women who need abortions. And with that amendment, as of 2007, only 17 out of 50 states provide that funding, and only 13 of those require a court order to do so. And the National Abortion Federation found that most of the abortions in the U.S. are provided in freestanding clinics, and in 2005, only 5% of them occurred in hospitals. And in 1980, only 2% took place in physicians' offices. And today, about 95% of women who need abortions have them in clinics or in private doctor's office where costs are kept low without increasing health risks. And my opponent also talked about how adoption is a better alternative than abortion, but he didn't mention how basically forcing a woman to go full term with her labor puts a lot of risk, especially if she's a teenage mother, which most are. And according to NT Health, as a pregnant teenager, you have higher risk of premature labor or going into delivery early. Discovery Health did a study that found that babies born to teenage mothers are more likely to die within the first year compared to born of mothers 20 years of age or older. And they also found that pelvic bones in young women do not reach their maximum size until the age of 18. Therefore, the pelvis of the teenage mother may not be grown enough to allow vaginal delivery of a normal sized baby. For this reason, there's a lot of cesarean sections that have to be performed on these teenage mothers, which cause even higher risk. And lastly, he didn't speak on either about the trauma that a mother would have to be put through, because a lot of unwanted pregnancies are caused by rape. And a writer from the American Journal of Preventive Medicine, Dr. Felicia Stewart and Dr. James Trussell, have estimated that there are 25,000 rape-related pregnancies each year in the United States. And the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists found that post-traumatic stress disorder may be a long-term consequence of sexual assault. And post-traumatic stress disorder is characterized by a cluster of symptoms involving re-experiencing trauma, avoidance, and these symptoms may not appear for months or even years after the traumatic experience. And they also have reported that some women say they have experienced difficulty with being touched with the medical procedures such as vaginal examinations, and some women have even experienced flashbacks during labor and difficulties breastfeeding, and have also dealt with depression during and after their pregnancy. And they have also been reported high levels of stress from the result of rape and can have a huge impact on their pregnancy. So with that being said, is it worth it to risk all the bad things happening to the mother and even the life of the mother to save an unwanted child?